Did you know that the 1976 Buick Century was once dubbed the Spirit of America? Now, don't get your hopes up too high. It may surprise you, but it wasn't all stars and stripes when it came to performance and reliability. All right, let's pop the hood and take a look at the heart of this beast. The 76 Century typically came with a robust 231 cubic inch V6 engine, but you could also opt for the 350 or 455 cubic inch V8 if you were feeling a bit more adventurous, or perhaps a bit nostalgic for the good old glory days of American muscle. While the engine lineup certainly sounded impressive, especially with those bigger V8s, the reality was a mixed bag. The oil crisis of the 70s was in full swing, so even these larger engines were somewhat choked by emissions regulations. The V6 produced around 110 horsepower, and the 455 V8 could muster up 205 horsepower. Quite modest, to be honest. And let's not forget the weight of the car. It was like moving a small house. This meant that performance-wise, it wasn't exactly a tire-screeching ride. The layman might say it had a bit of a sluggish demeanor. Now, culturally, the 1976 Buick Century had a bit of an identity crisis. It was a car trying to straddle two eras: the raw, untamed power of the muscle car era and the more sedate, practical vehicles that came after. It found a unique spot for itself within television history, though, especially with the Colonel Steve Austin driving it around in the $6 Million Man. Quite fittingly, it was more about style and comfort than outright performance. Speaking of comfort, the ride quality was genuinely something to write home about. Buick had a reputation for producing cars that pampered the passengers, and the Century was no different. Plush interiors, a ride that soaked up the bumps, and enough space to take the whole family on a road trip without rubbing elbows constantly. However, not everything was perfect in paradise. One of the glaring issues was the gas mileage. Even with the V6, the Century wasn't exactly sipping fuel gracefully. With the larger V8s, you could watch the gas gauge needle move every time you pressed the accelerator. Let's just say you'd better make friends with your local gas station attendant. There were also grumblings about the handling. The steering was often described as vague, and the car had a tendency for body roll that could make sharp turns an adventure in itself. Parallel parking? More like parallel guess and check, thanks to its considerable size. For all its quirks, the 1976 Buick Century managed to carve out a niche for itself in a rapidly changing automotive landscape. Its blend of retro appeal, television fame, and comfort-first design remains a fascinating chapter in Buick's storied history. So for those of you who remember blasting down the highway in one, or perhaps wrenching under the hood, the 76 Century is worth a nod, both for what it achieved and its less-than-perfect moments. After all, isn't that what makes car culture so intriguing? The stories and the speed bumps along the way.